I've always felt that I can handle terrible things happening to me as long as I can make meaning out of it and share it with other people in some sort of helpful way. And I realized that over the last 5 or so years and over the last lifetime, there's been a lot of different things that have happened to me that I've finally been able to reflect on in a really meaningful way. I've been able to find the silver lining in them, the lesson in them. And nothing brings me more joy than being able to elucidate and storytell and communicate those learnings to other people, because I know you guys get it. I know you're going through similar things. I know that this life is getting us all. And if we don't have a space to speak candidly about the things that we're trying to process, and if we don't have a space to reflect and really understand ourselves better, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So I'm trying out a new format here, and I'm sort of trying to bring that goal to life by talking about these various topics that I feel like life has given me a crash course in the last few years. And I'm just trying to share my greatest lessons and anything of value that I feel like I can share with you through these episodes. And so today, the format switch up is going to be my producer doing more of a Q&A style around friendship breakups, but not just friendship breakups, but how to really identify and cultivate more positive friendships, especially as you grow and change and evolve and your needs and what you're looking for in relationships change. And she's kind of just throwing some questions at me, and we're seeing what comes out. And I was really honored to be able to chat about this with her and with you guys. And I think that you'll be able to really relate to a lot of this and see yourself in the situations that I talk about and in my perspective on friendship breakups and why I actually don't fear them, why I don't think that they're a bad thing, and I don't feel like there's shame around them or someone to blame. I feel like they are one of life's most divine mirrors and teachers. And I think that this will help to perhaps, I hope this will help to give you a refreshed perspective on the power of friendships and the power of knowing when to move on, how to be curious around dysfunctional dynamics, how to either improve things or be okay with letting things go, and how to utilize the container of friendship when it works and when it doesn't to help fuel your own growth and understanding of this world and relationships in general. So let's talk about it. Let's get into the nitty-gritty on friendships, where they go wrong, how to help them go right, and all of the things that we can learn along the way. Let's talk real life, right? I think the best way to move through life is to always be the student and to always be curious. Life will show you either way. It's just how you choose to listen. You can always count on you. You will always have your own back. This is not the last thing you'll create. Play is the process, but sometimes it has to be dramatic. That's the funny part. When your back's up against the wall, you will prevail. You're allowed to grow and change. You're allowed to birth something new. I hope you make your art.
Let's ease in with this. If you had to pick just one thing, what's the thing you look for these days in a friend?
I think the number one sign of someone who has the capacity to be a good friend is someone who has a relationship with themselves. Shocking to hear me say, I know. It's really my hyperfixation is cultivating that relationship with the self. But I think when someone knows themselves, can they take a true interest in knowing you? And can they have space for you because they've created space for themselves? It's like that quote that says, only when you're comfortable being alone with yourself can you interact with others without using them as an escape. Mm-hmm. And I think that someone who has their own mind, who is, willing to say no to going to this place or hanging out this day because it just doesn't work for them, or like someone who's really strong in their boundaries, especially if you're not used to that, especially if you're coming from a history of dysfunctional relationships or like imbalanced friendships or like kind of that like toxic dance that I think so many of our younger relationships are, especially as a woman, like with other female friends. I think so much of that was modeled on this push-pull dynamic that I had with my mom. And for so many women, it is like that original mother wound. And so we're just trying to get our bearings in those early relationships. And so we honestly might not be used to healthy dynamics. We might not actually be used to people saying no or setting boundaries or like advocating for themselves. We're so used to kind of like folding for another person or people pleasing and then ending up resenting them. Or we're so used to unhealthy dynamics that someone knowing who they are and thus knowing what their limits are and when they need to say no and not overextending themselves for us and actually being their own person in a relationship can just be like jarring. But that's actually the biggest thing I look for.
Why do you think we often enter into relationship dynamics that are like the ones we had with our mothers?
We all are kind of like trying to play out our original wounding, in my opinion, and from what I've read. So our original wounding is like our attachment with our caregivers, right? What we didn't receive in that relationship. We're almost trying to subconsciously, we're more attracted to someone who's going to re-enter that dynamic with us so that we can play it out to a different ending and kind of like win it or have closure around it. So I think that we are really attracted to people that like are our perfect puzzle piece fit for our trauma. We're kind of like the perfect fit for someone who's going to be our mother or our father or whatever it is. And so Dr. Drew would always say that when someone walks in a room and it's like lightning strikes when they walk in the room and they light up to you, that is the person that you don't go towards. It's going to feel like you've known them all your lives. You're going to have butterflies. You're going to want to talk to them all night. You're going to naturally overshare and like just connect right away. And that's because your body is recognizing that dynamic, is recognizing that trauma. And in fact, you have to learn how to go for the person that doesn't necessarily feel as sparkly, but is equally a wonderful person and just as valuable. They're just not quite as attractive because they don't, light up those centers. And the person who you are instantly connecting with and instantly oversharing with and bonding with, that's not necessarily a natural thing, right? Like connections take time. Sharing should be earned. Really healthy, good boundaries would be not kind of going into a dynamic with someone too quickly. But whenever you meet that person where it's like you just fall into that thing, I think that's your sign, or that's my sign at least, to be careful, because that person is either there to be like level 4 of the lesson that you've learned 3 times before, or you can start to recognize that archetype, that person immediately and choose differently. Otherwise, you kind of like keep going through to the next level.
When I think about friendship breakups, I think about the hardest ones are the ones that were the most unhealthy. And the more unhealthy they are, the more pain they cause and the least likely you are to break it off. Because what you just described is really hard.
Usually you're forced.
Yeah, that is true.
I think usually a friendship breakup, the reason that it's inevitable, and my friend Kadeen says this all the time, is that sometimes it has to be dramatic. You're just not going to get the memo unless it's dramatic. And you're going to get little signs along the way. You're going to get little red flags. You're going to get little inklings from your intuition that you are self-effacing and self-sacrificing in order to stay in this dynamic. There's going to be things that don't feel right. There's going to be things that don't sit well with you. And the more that you ignore those, especially not just things that don't sit well with you about that person, because it's like, there's no situation in life where someone else is just the bad guy, right? We got to all take ownership here and we're all doing a dance. So some of the red flags are like, what don't I like about my behavior while I'm with this person? Some of the self-effacing and the self-betrayal is who you become when you're around that person. So when you don't start to pay attention to those red flags, it could be how they treat you and little things that they say or ways that they belittle you or make you feel, or it could be that you're engaging in more unhealthy habits while you're with them. It could be that, you guys have really unhealthy dynamics together and like get to play those out. And that's why that person is so sparkly and attractive to you, because you get to like play out your shadow with them. And it's like a shadow playground. It could be that you don't like the person that you become while you're around them because they're a reflection for you of parts of yourself that you've already worked on and been able to move past, but now all of a sudden they're being dug back up as like a warning of like this person is not aligned for you, right? Like they are a reflection of a part of you that you've already agreed you are going to grow out of and evolve past. And so are you going to stay in that part of you if that's what this person can hold for you? And there's also some people that don't even necessarily fit any of those criteria, perhaps. They just simply can't hold a vision for you because they can't hold a vision for themselves. And that's where I kind of look at having high standards for the relationships that you do choose to have in your life, not just like taking away the ones that are clearly toxic and clearly not aligned for you, but really looking at, I only have so much energy. I only have so many actual hours, weekend moments, plans that I can make with select individuals in my entire life if I'm going to actually be a dog mom, see my family, get my work done, work on my creative pursuits, take care of my body, cook. Like you really don't have that much time. And so who are the people that are, doesn't mean that they need to be on your level or moving in the same exact direction as you, or like at whatever pace you're going. They have a totally different journey. But who are the people that are committed to their own journey? Who are the people that are really committed to being honest with themselves, becoming a better person for themselves each and every day, and that are willing to and able to hold a higher vision for themselves, which then means they can hold a higher vision for you. And those are the relationships that are the most expanding and that are really worth investing our time and our hearts into. Because if a person can't see more for themselves and can't see more for themselves, can't want more for themselves, isn't doing that work to build that relationship with themselves, they also cannot want more for you. And somewhere in them, you continuing to see more for yourself or move past certain obstacles is always going to be a reflection for them, a dig at them. It's always going to kind of clash in some way. And they're always going to almost like hold you to an older version of yourself because they are not able to move past their versions. Like there's something very special about being able to hold a vision for other people. And I think it comes again a lot from being able to do that for yourself, whether it's just being 1% better tomorrow. So there's that. But yeah, going back to the different ways in which someone can be bad for you, and sometimes it's your own behavior not being something that you're proud of when you're with them, there's all these little red flags that come up. And you can listen to them in the moment. You can be present to them. You can have the hard conversations. You can point it out to that person and see how they respond. If they respond and they're like, oh, wow, thanks for bringing that to my attention, I totally hear that. Let's try to do better moving forward or whatever. If they're willing to take personal responsibility, and you can also take personal responsibility for your role in that dynamic, and they're willing to work with you and hear you out, fine. But if you ignore those red flags or you bring them up to that person and they're not willing to take any personal responsibility and you still accept that and still move forward and keep engaging in that dynamic, it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be catastrophic at some point, and things are going to hit the fan in a way where you have no choice but to move on without them because something so intense has happened that things will simply never be the same, and you can't unsee what you've seen, or you end up being hurt and like the timelines kind of change. Like you just can't go back to it. So life will show you either way. It's just how you choose to listen. And if you want to save yourself the heartache of the dramatic version, although sometimes you need the heartache of the dramatic version in order to actually move past them because the toxic bond is too strong. So sometimes that serves a purpose, and it hurts like hell in the moment, but you look back and you're like, thank God, because if that didn't happen, if that didn't blow up in my face, I might not have ever gotten the message and been able to see for so long like how this relationship was holding me back, or how I was holding myself back by continuing to engage in it. Sometimes people just hold, again, that older version of us. It's very rare to find friends and anyone in your life that is willing to continue meeting the new versions of you. And again, I think they have to be willing to continue meeting the new version of themselves. They have to see that evolution is possible and welcome it. And a lot of people don't do that. That's why friendships are hard. That's why long-term friendships are really hard, and why people grow apart. So to be around people who are continuously committed to their own growth and are there for yours, and your growth is not a reflection of them and has no tie to them because they're on their own path, they're focused on themselves, and therefore can see you as a separate human being and not project onto you or see you as a threat or a reflection to them. Like, it's so rare to find those relationships where each of you are on your own true path and you get to just be the witness, be the cheerleader, and look over at them in parallel and be like, you got this. Yeah. You know, relationships are so tempting. They're the only thing, right? Like, they're like the thing in life. Every song is written about a relationship. Every problem is a relationship. It's like, that's what life is, relationships. So of course, our greatest pain is going to be played out in relationships. So it's going to be very tempting to like throw up all our wounding and like work through our shit in relationships. That's normal. But to gain the awareness around that and constantly try to do differently and constantly self-reflect and take that responsibility is like the goal.
How can we navigate change in friendships, especially when this concept of us having the full freedom to change ends up moving them in totally different directions and ends up making you guys distant?
Sometimes someone's changing isn't going to serve you because it's not about you. So if you really love somebody, you're willing to be there through them changing in the way that they need to change, even if that means right now you guys aren't connecting as much, or even if it means right now you guys aren't spending as much time, or if it means that it's not as convenient for you. You can't get what you were getting from the relationship. It's so annoying, but I'm going to go back to right relationship of being able to see someone else fully for who they are. And that's the test. Like, can you love that person for who they are and not at all what they do for you or what they provide for you? Not to say that we don't give things and gift things to each other. That is part of love and part of relationships. Of course, we provide for each other in so many different ways. And we are social creatures. We need each other. But is your love for that person or your relationship with that person dependent upon them doing that providing and giving you that unique gift or service that they provide for you? Can you love them independently of that just for who they are when they don't have the capacity to do for you? That, I think, is the greatest test. And there's going to be times in your life, like my best friend a few years back, and still is, but like especially 2 years ago, was deeply in grief and didn't talk to any of us for 2 months, right? It was just like, do not contact me. Like, I will tell you when I'm ready. And when she did, she was just in such a deep grief process where everything that we used to connect on, our 10-hour conversations about spirituality and God and the universe and, you know, believing in magic and signs and all these things. She's like, I don't believe in any of that shit anymore. I hate God. God doesn't exist. I don't believe in signs. I can't believe who I was. Like, every piece of common ground or like piece of what we talked about that used to, you know, validate me in some way and make me feel good about my beliefs and, you know, provide me comfort because I wasn't alone in it. Like, there's so many things that someone else's companionship and camaraderie does for us, right? But if I'm strong in those beliefs on my own, it's totally okay that she doesn't feel that way. I don't need her for that, right? So, and I don't need her to be anything other than what she is right now. And right now she needs to be grieving. And so she doesn't need to show up in the way that she used to, or be fun, or be this, or be that, or like, she was like, I'm not going to be fun for the next foreseeable future. I'm not going to be this. I'm not going to be that. When we all hang out, I'm going to sit there and not talk. And I hope you guys still want to be around me. And we were like, yeah, absolutely. Come and just chill. Like, that's fine. And so that is a different level of relationship. And to me, that's true love. And that's your test for someone. Can you really love for them when they can do nothing for you? And a lot of the times our relationships are ways to get subconsciously are ways to get our needs met that we're not able to meet internally. And I think it's a really healthy thing to have others meet your needs, again, because we need each other and we're social creatures and that's how life works. But at the same time, it's really healthy to be able to meet those needs on your own if you have to be self-sufficient in that way, but to know that you don't want to always do that and you can rely on others. So it's such a delicate balance to really love people and really to be in integrity in relationships.
I think a lot of what people are in search of right now is, like you've said, community. And I think a lot of that is constantly building new friendships, because whenever we do have to come to terms with somebody leaving our lives, we then have to create space for new people to come into our lives. So what are some positive ways that people should be approaching friendships from the beginning?
I think part of it comes down to being very choosy about who you allow in, like truly in the first place. And I think that comes with time. Again, as we're younger, as we're still operating from a more wounded place, I feel so far away from it now because I have done a lot of work around like what I guess you would call the mother wound. And my female friendships used to feel so much harder than they feel now. I feel almost like a mother now. And I feel like my friends and we've all like been able to like really mother each other and come from such a beautiful place. But it wasn't always that way. And I definitely struggled with female friendships when I was younger. So I think when you're in that place, the younger you are, the less discerning you are. Maybe discernment is the right answer, but the less discerning you are, it's like you just want to let everything in. You're like, oh, this person likes me. Amazing. You don't really necessarily think about, but do I like them? And do I like myself when I'm with them? And do I like the person that I'm becoming, like through the way that we're influencing each other? Like it's such a dance. The people around us really do influence who we are. And so I think a lot of the times we're so focused, again, when we're younger and always like from our wounded place, we can be very focused on trying to perform and impress. And like our goal unconsciously of a new meeting, an evening where you're meeting new people, is to get everyone to like you. And you could do that all day with the right act. You could do that all day. Crack a few jokes, be sarcastic, pay attention to everyone's needs, read the room, mirror, be who people need you to be. If you grew up with trauma, you know exactly how to do that. Like you're an expert. So, know that your ability to do that does not set you up for truly aligned and rewarding friendships. Your ability to do that sets you up to be a little bit too open and too accessible to a lot of people because you're much more concerned about, will they accept me? Like I need to go out towards them. I need to be accepted by them. I need to be liked. Again, I'm looking externally because I don't have that within myself, that I like myself and I know who I am. We're kind of like looking for ourselves and everybody else, that we're not flipping the filter and being like, no, like this is who I am and this is who I'm not. And this is what I like to do. And this is what I don't like to do. And when I'm around this person, I'm feeling like I need to perform a little bit more. I'm like, my body's feeling uncomfortable. I can't even put a finger on it, but I'm just feeling a little bit more on edge, or I'm feeling like I'm masking, or I'm feeling like whatever. We're not necessarily paying attention to those things. We're like ignoring those body signals and brain signals in lieu of being accepted and being liked. But it's okay to be a filter. It's okay to be choosy. It's okay to be picky. That's kind of what you have to do in order to protect from letting too much in. Because if you let too much in, you are going to have a lot to filter out. You are going to have more loss because too much came in. You weren't necessarily careful at the gate. So now you have to send security in to kick them out. So it's far more worth it to go slow with people. And again, like I think that is my greatest lesson when building friendships in my older years, after really understanding my worth, not in an egoic way whatsoever, but in a way of like, I have a lot to give. I have a really big heart. I really love people. And I really, I've built a really beautiful life and I have beautiful people around me and I want to protect them too. And I know their worth. I just know the worth of like where I'm at. And it's okay to want to protect that. And I think that I used to value how quickly can I get close with someone, or like how, I think that was something that I really looked for. Again, it's the whole, I feel like I've known you my whole life thing. It's the whole lightning strike, perfect trauma match kind of thing, where that to me was a good sign, was getting really close with someone really fast and clicking and having so much in common and all the things, until I realized that like the best way to create truly sustainable, real connections is the slow way. It's the best way to do everything, right? Like a really fast success is not sustainable. Someone that blows up on TikTok overnight for one video isn't necessarily going to have long-standing success compared to someone who's been making little videos every day for 6 years, and then it seems like overnight they become successful, but it was actually all the work they did over those 6 years that somehow then worked, and then they have a body of work and a routine and consistency to fall back on, and it becomes sustainable. Like the slow way is the best way for everything, but that's not as satisfying to our ego, or it's not as satisfying to the wounded part of us who wants to be liked right away, or who wants to immediately be comfortable and immediately overshare. Like that's the boundary thing. And I think that's the like leftovers from the childhood wounding, where you didn't necessarily learn that you're sacred and you deserve to not like give all of these parts of you away so quickly in order to receive love. So I think that's what I look for most when building relationships now, is that if that's a relationship that's meant to be in my life and is meant to be sustained, we can go the slow way and it's going to happen. And I can trust that. And if it's happening too much too soon, there's usually something that's a little bit off. Where, I have one friend that I've known for several years now, and she's a family member of one of my really close friends. And so we've been in each other's orbits for like, let's say 5-6 years. And we would always kind of like see each other at hangouts and parties and whatever. And we'd always chat, but there was never that lightning strike. There was never that trauma bond. And so we just kind of kept each other at that acquaintance level and like kind of always stayed a little bit open, but whatever. And then on a recent trip, all of a sudden, like all of that groundwork, there was a spark and we realized, oh, wait a second, like we're really alike in all these different ways, but not alike in these trauma ways, alike in all of these ways where we really have common interests and we're both kind of like sciencey nerds. And it's like the things that you bond over that are true, genuine interests and not, like side effects of trauma. And that's not quite as attractive as, like attractive, quote unquote, to the emotional body as someone who is perfectly willing to, I don't know, like overgive or people please or whatever your dynamic is that's easy to fall back into. Connecting over like being science nerds isn't, quite as boosting to the brain chemicals. So we ended up really bonding over this trip. And ever since then, we've been building such a beautiful friendship. And it's really been brick by brick. It's really taken like these consistent check-ins and like our FaceTime each week and this and that. And it feels so different from the really exciting, same way like a really exciting romantic relationship burns out really fast or ends up being the more toxic one. It's worth it to go slow. So I just always look for that now. And that's advice that one of my best friends gave me too. She's like, to avoid these friendship breakups from happening in the future, she's like, really pay attention to your behavior, not theirs. Like you're not really looking for red flags in them. That's not really always what it's about. And we also don't always want to be scanning for like ways in which people are bad and wrong. I think it's looking for the red flags in our own behavior of where am I feeling like I'm instantly wanting to share too much or wanting to give too much, or where do I see that I don't know, that my body doesn't want to fully turn towards them, or like, it's like these subtle little things that you have to learn to look for in yourself rather than in the other person. And what's really safe for you, again, when you come from a history of trauma, is not going to be what feels most fun and exciting, actually, in the beginning.
Are there questions that you ask yourself that bring more clarity around, is that friendship an elevator friendship that rose really fast? and shouldn't be trusted? Or is it somebody that I'm just going through a rough time with and deserves my forgiveness or deserves my empathy and my patience? How do you discern those two?
I try to get really curious at all times. Curiosity is my number one tool. And my analytical brain serves me well in that sense. And I apply it to my relationships. And so I will try to constantly be curious about all different things in a relationship. I will be curious again about my own red flags. I'll sometimes be curious about patterns, right? I had this one friend where I was like, why is it that this is when I used to smoke, right? And when I was trying to stop smoking, why is it that I always want to smoke weed as soon as I'm with them? Even if they don't really smoke like that, or like they only smoke with me sometimes. Like, why do I instantly want to be high and dissociate? Why do I want to eat a ton of cookies after they leave my house? Why am I exhibiting like a stress response, right? Is really the question I was asking. But at that point, it was just like these little nuggets of behavior where I was like, oh, I'm just noticing this. I'm noticing the breadcrumbs. And then, of course, the curiosity that comes after that is, where can I take responsibility there? Was I just too tired to hang out tonight? And I said yes anyway. And so now me wanting to eat a bunch of sugar is just like my body trying to get energy because I'm just so depleted. That could very well be a thing. But if it's really consistent and if it's happening even when I feel energized and good, then, you keep asking. So it's like constantly asking questions, not assuming that we know answers. I think that like the best way to move through life is to always be the student and to always be curious and just asking these open-ended reflective questions about our behavior, our experiences, the outcomes of everything. Why did I act like that today? Why did that happen? Even when it comes to like me posting on social media, I'm like, why did people receive it this way? Is it them or is it me? I don't know. Let me be curious about it so that I can perhaps take something from this or learn how to leave what's not mine. It's like constantly really being open to the answer being something different than what you expect it is. So I guess that's kind of like removing your ego. The same way I would be curious about, why do I want to eat or smoke when I'm with this person? Sometimes I'd be curious as to, hey, why did that person say that thing that didn't sit right with me? Were they having a bad day? Were they just off? Is this a pattern? Is this repeated behavior? Was it malicious? Was it unconscious? A lot of times people know what they're doing. Most of the time people know what they're doing. And sometimes people don't know what they're doing. And sometimes you can really tell when it's someone who's just simply unconscious to their own patterns and is just going through it and is like stuck in their own cycles and can't quite see their own cycles or isn't quite ready for that spiritual, emotional journey just yet, versus someone who is aware and intelligent and kind of like knows what they're doing. And so it's also asking those questions when the conflicts do perhaps arise. Again, like, why did that person say that thing like that? Should I bring it up to them? And most of the time it's about bringing it up to them and being direct, because I think that's another really great way to not like test your friendships, but it is a testament to the quality of the friendship. Can I approach that person when something felt off? And as long as I'm coming from a loving place, can they really receive that? And thus it is my responsibility to truly come from that loving place. So it's like always, always, always taking personal responsibility. I think that's the number one key to relationships in general and to life, right? Like your situation is your own, and we all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce, right? Like that's the famous Plato said it. So I think that a personal responsibility mindset in general will get you really far in life, but especially in friendships. And then a curious mindset will get you a really long way. And there's been times where it really is about using your own discernment, because, and that's a muscle that you build over time. Sometimes it takes a few friendship breakups or getting to know a bunch of different types of people from a bunch of different walks of life who put on good acts and some not so good and whatever. Like sometimes you just got to learn people through the school of life, and there's no shortcut to that. So that's how discernment is built. Sometimes you can gain that discernment from growing up in a really bad neighborhood. That's how my husband gained it. He's like the most discerning person ever. That's the people that can read people usually had to go through really hard things. So again, it's like, it's not a proud thing to wear. Like they had to suffer to get it, but that's okay. And I've had situations where, for example, one friend really came at me sideways once, and I had enough discernment and enough curiosity and like openness in my heart to like first not take it personally and try to look at it objectively and say, the way that this person is coming at me, which feels hurtful and inappropriate and all the things, is this really who they've shown me that they are through repeated behavior, or is this a one-off? Does this really feel like it's a projection, that it's something that they're going through and they're having a hard time right now and they're projecting on me? And if so, is it worth it to like bring that up to them, or is it something that they need to see on their own? Is there any truth to what this person is saying to me, even though it stings and it hurts right now? Is there anything I can take from this where I can hear some truth in it and can acknowledge and take ownership for my part, and then also let them know what I'm not okay with and leave the rest, and like let them know that I will be upholding my boundaries there and not accepting that kind of treatment? And do I feel like this is like a fatal flaw in our relationship, or do I feel like this is something that they will eventually be able to see in a different light because like I trust them, and again, their past proves future. Their past behavior is showing me that this isn't necessarily who they are. This is just something that they're projecting onto me in this moment. And so in that situation, I kind of like went through all four of those things and did a little bit of all four. And after they kind of came at me in this way that they had never come at me before, and you know, created this conflict, I took ownership for the parts of it that felt really true, and like had to humble myself and like feel the sting of like, ooh, they're right about that. I could definitely apologize for that. Okay, let me first start off the conversation with that. It's also understanding like the rules of conflict, right? And like how to disarm people in conflict. I don't know if I learned that through YouTube videos or TED Talks or whatever, but maybe it's being a business owner. I don't know. Like, but you're supposed to always start off, if you're going to give criticism, with like the thing that, like with like a compliment or the thing that you really liked about it before you give the criticism. It's just kind of like the basics of keeping things smooth and disarming people in like a non-manipulative way, in like a positive way, so that you can meet a common goal. So like I started with, here's what I can apologize for. Absolutely, I hear you. And at the same time, I feel that X, Y, and Z of what you just said or did was really unfair. And, you know, that really doesn't sit well with me, and that hurts. And at the same time, because I felt through my discernment that a lot of it was that person projecting and like going through a hard time, and that I couldn't make that person see that they were projecting. I couldn't make that person see the bigger picture of it all that they needed to learn by going through whatever they were going through and eventually reflect on their own. So I chose to not try to like tell someone about themselves. That's like another big rule that I have with people, is like, you can't tell someone about themselves. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't work. It's not your place. They need to learn about themselves for themselves. So just keep it to yourself. And I just decided to shoulder it. And after speaking my piece and also taking ownership, I decided to kind of leave it where it was and realize that I have a lot of love for this person. And what they did was not necessarily malicious. It felt more projection than malicious. And it felt more like a process they were going through than them breaking a principle, you know? And I just decided to like kind of leave it where it was and give the relationship space. And that relationship definitely like went from a super close one to like I always will love you and will always ride for you. But right now we're just like a little bit on the periphery and we're taking space. And then eventually, because sometimes space is the kindest thing you can do for somebody, because you can't hold someone's hand for them, because you do have to let people be the victor in their own story, because you can't tell people about themselves and you can't fix things for people. Sometimes the distance or the time that you take from people, while it may hurt them initially, and while it may be hard to do and sad and painful to do, if you really ride for them in the long run and you're kind of doing it consciously with the hope that they're going to come back around and come back even better after the pain of that distance changes them, after the reflection of, hey, why did my friend or my friends take distance from me? After that permeates them and changes them in some way and creates like a catalyst for self-reflection, then they have an opportunity to come back around as a person who is like actually changed by your love and kindness through your distance and your boundaries. And you don't tell people your boundaries, you show them through your behavior and your distance. Like, that's really what I believe. You can't tell someone, I won't answer your call while I'm working, if you're answering your call while you're working, to tell them that. That's what Evie Pomporis said on the podcast. And I'll never forget it. So you actually just don't answer that call until they learn. And so by taking distance from this person, by just moving through the relationship differently in a true way, because I did feel a little bit wounded by that. I did feel like a little bit more trepidatious in terms of, oh, okay, this person is in a state where they're maybe not thinking clearly, or they're maybe projecting a bit. And so I am going to have to like wade through these waters differently, and they are going to feel that, but I'm doing it from a true place, not to punish them, but to protect myself until I can feel like I can really trust them to be there with me and be really self-aware of their behavior so that we can engage in a safe relationship. And through that time, we came back around, and they had experienced so much growth in the time that we had distance. They experienced different friendships right in that time. They were able to put their time towards other people, try different things in the world, realize through some harder lessons or some other things, some lessons that ended up being very applicable to our friendship becoming stronger, kind of the lessons that they needed to learn that I couldn't teach them back then. That wasn't my place to, nor do I think I'm like God that can teach them something. And we ended up being a lot stronger for it. And they only continue to grow because they continue to have that like will to. And they showed me that they have that will to, and they showed me that they're committed to their own growth. And so that relationship is only stronger now. And now I get to put in the work of meeting them again, like the attending 1,000 births of who they're becoming and the funerals of who they used to be. So now we still have to equally put in the work to now get to know each other as who we are now. And I get to know them in this stage of their life after they've learned these lessons. And it's still going to take work, and it's always going to be something that's worth working on. And so that is a totally different situation from other friendship conflicts I've had where past proved future in a different way, and where they came at me sideways and I said, oh, this is a pattern. This isn't a one-off. Or my discernment said, like, you're not going to let this person push you around again. You have to kind of put your foot down. Or when I did put my foot down, whereas with person A, where we came back around and solved it, when I said to them, I'm going to take ownership for this thing, but these other things that you said to me are really hurtful, and I really don't accept those. They didn't punish me for having that opinion. That we kind of had a bit of a discourse, and it was like, okay, like I can see where you're coming from, and whatever. Like there wasn't like a punishment for me having my own opinion and being a person in our conflict. But in situations with other people, again, where they came at me and I didn't love it, when I did stand up for myself a bit, again, still take ownership, but give reasonable pushback, I noticed how much they wanted to talk me out of my own reality. Or I noticed how much they were uncomfortable by me asserting that, hey, I'm not okay with that. And it was a totally different energy. So I think you really have to, again, like still approaching everything humbly and still approaching everything, taking your ownership, asking yourself the questions, being willing to engage in discourse, being willing to acquiesce in certain ways, but also stand up for yourself in other ways. Not only does the initial thing that the person does give you information, but the way that they respond to you when you try to solve the conflict or when you stand up for yourself or whatever, that is equally as important information, if not more important. It's like, well, the things that happen after. And everything is information in a relationship, and you just need to choose if you want to continue engaging with them after you continue to have repeated information and patterns start to be put together. So it's just discernment when I guess that was your question, like when it comes down to choosing who you try to work it out with and who you have a friendship breakup with. It's like this repeated kind of thing where you have to listen to who they're showing you they are.
What would you say to somebody who is going through the grief of a friendship breakup?
It almost feels like a death. I mean, it's a friendship breakup is horrible. Some of them are relieving and it totally depends. But I've had some where it is, you just don't really get over it. And that's just kind of the price you pay of loving someone. Sometimes that's the price you pay of living. That's the price you pay of all of the immense experience, positivity, lessons, everything that you gained from that relationship. Sometimes it stings. And my husband always says, lessons not learned in blood are soon forgotten. That's probably the relationship that you're grieving the most, is the one that gave you the greatest gifts in terms of lessons you will never forget. Because in order for you to really internalize and embody a lesson and act on it, you have to let pain change you. Pain is the only thing that changes you. Unfortunately, like when we're in pain, everything is amplified. When we're in pain, we have such a different perspective. We're pained enough to move. We're pained enough to like do something about it. So pain is really, really useful and important. And it also like solidifies memories in a certain way, and it solidifies things. So sometimes that is what's necessary so that you never make that mistake again. And it's okay to really love somebody, even if they hurt you really badly. Like I would say one of the people that I grieve the most did me dirty, like really did me dirty. And I don't necessarily think loved me the way I loved them. Like I really don't, looking back. And yet I don't feel stupid for loving them, because that is actually the thing that they need most. And that's why they hurt me so badly. And so am I stupid for loving them, or are they, silly for fumbling me? I would say the latter. I don't think you ever lose by loving, but really feel into the love that you lost. Really grieve it. Really let yourself go through the motions so that it doesn't get stuck. And just also be stoic and remember why you did it. You cut them off for a reason. Like you had to protect yourself, and it's okay to just be stung, and it's okay to mourn the loss of that, because there's also a gift that they gave you. There was a part of you that this is how every relationship works, right? And this is the magic of relationship. And I've talked about this before. I made a post about how people and plants have the same medicine, and that the way that a plant works, if you're using something like passion flower for anxiety, that's a plant that's working by technically boosting your GABA neurotransmitters in your brain in order to shift you into a calmer state within your nervous system. So that means you're having less anxiety. That calmer state, that release of GABA, is available to you at any time. It is an endogenous state. It's your own neurochemicals. So it's not like that calm state is impossible for you to access on your own through deep breathing or like focusing on kittens or whatever it is, like through centering yourself. It's just that when you're having an anxiety attack, or when you're having like sustained anxiety and can't necessarily shift out of that pattern as easily yourself, that plant is like a key that unlocks something for you. Plants evolved with us in order to work with our biochemistry. Like their phytochemicals are like lock and key for our enzymes and bodily processes, and they are able to unlock states within us far more easily than we'd be able to access them on our own. That's why they're medicines. That's why they're tools. That's like how any medicine works. And the same is true for people and for our relationships, right? We co-evolved with people. We're social creatures. We evolved very closely with our communities, and we were always far more collectivist and like tied to one another for survival than we are now even. And so that's how our nervous systems are wired. We are co-regulators as beings. When I'm next to you and my nervous system is calm, you feel that. We're co-regulating. And when one of us is dysregulated, the other person feels that. And our nervous systems are speaking without us having to speak. So we're all very intimately intertwined, and the same way plants evolved with us, people did. And so part of the magic of relationship with people and part of the medicine of relationship with people is just like that passion flower plant unlocks a calmer state within your nervous system that was already there, right? That plant mirrors for you what's already inside of you and helps you to access it and find it and recognize it and hold it. That's what a person does, right? Like a person, it's why we love the people in our lives. And that's why no two of our relationships are the same, because each person brings their own distinctive, unique medicine, and everyone is special in their own way. And everyone has a certain je ne sais quoi about them that no one else quite has. And so when we're in relationship with that person and we recognize them and we really, especially if you really see them fully, again, these like very intimate female friendships, when you really see somebody fully, like you allow yourself to be immersed in the magic of who they are, sometimes even more so than they can see it, right? Like, and by seeing them, like that's why having right relationship is so important. In a selfish way, it's like, it's the best thing ever, because when you fully see somebody else, you get this gift of seeing that in yourself too. Like the best of them gets to also be unlocked in you, just like that plant is unlocking something that exists within you too, in your nervous system, the calmness. A person is unlocking that same kind of like magic that you recognize in them within you. And so they expand you and they like show you this part of yourself that you didn't even know existed. And you're like, oh my God, like that's when you're like, I love who I am when I'm with this person, or I can be different with this person than I can be with this person just because of like what they bring out in me. And that's why our people are so special and why we do need people. People introduce us to different parts of ourselves. No man is an island. You know, there's no point of life if we're living it alone. We don't grow when we're just on our own. We grow through our relationships. We only learn about ourselves through our relationships. So it's like there's such this beautiful symbiotic dance that we all perform for one another, and why I'm so passionate about relationships. But all that to say, the person that you got to be and you got to see that you are, that you've always been, thanks to the magic of this person who you loved so deeply, is still there. That is the gift that you get to take, even though you're grieving and even though you lost the relationship. There is that small token of consolation that the person that was revealed, or the part of you that was revealed to you, it's not like they gave it to you, but they revealed that it was already in you, is always going to be with you. So you can always carry a piece of them with you by continuing to embody like the best parts of them and the best parts of you. And even as we take pain from that relationship, we also take something really special and something really good. And even as we're hurting or we're reflecting on the hurt that they caused us, or we're angry with them, there's such duality in life, and duality is the nature of life, that there's two like absolutely opposite opposing truths that are true at the same time at all times. Like that is, it's the scariest thing to come to terms with in life, but it is the thing. And so as much as someone can hurt us, sometimes they gift us with something through their magic, and sometimes, right, they gift us with seeing a part of ourselves through the way in which they hurt us, because all of a sudden we unlock a part of ourselves that's a fighter. We unlock a part of ourselves that's going to protect us at all costs. And we're like, oh, I didn't know I had that in me. I didn't know that I could like be that person who's there for me, or who, you know, it's like we get to meet another part of ourselves through actually having to defend ourselves against them, or through the pain that they caused us. So no matter what, we do end up taking something positive from even the worst situations, the worst endings, the most painful breakups, whatever. And that's the nature of life. Like nature doesn't take without giving, and same with relationships.
How do you feel about ghosting? Like, do you think there's a
I'm a little bit of a ghoster.
There's a space for it?
I'm a little bit of a ghoster.
Is there space for it though?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Why?
there's space for ghosting.
Why?
No, you know what? I think there's space for attempting to communicate, realizing that that communication will simply not be received and will not be stood for. You know, that person is like not the container in which your communicative efforts will be fruitful. they don't have the capacity to witness you. They don't have the capacity to hold two truths. They don't have the capacity to hold their truth and yours at the same time. They don't have the capacity to take some personal responsibility. There's really only room for their pain. And that's probably how they're living their entire life, right? Which is, again, why it's so important to do all the work, personal growth, relationship with yourself, yada, yada. So once you recognize that you've tried to communicate and this is not a safe person to communicate to, and you'll really only be further hurt by trying to explain yourself, but you're kind of only going to disrespect yourself further by continuing to try to explain yourself to someone who's not going to hold it, because your feelings are sacred. Like, you don't have to explain them to someone who's not going to treat them as such. I think you do the communication that's necessary. Once you've seen what you needed to see, you can really give them a good, I tried and I really wish you the best. And that it's just not gonna, it's just a no from me, Simon. And I think you can just move on. And there's some situations where you just have to do that. Otherwise, it's going to just continue to be this playing out of a dance and continue to be this push and pull, and they're just not going to meet you. So I think there has to be some kind of prefacing, some kind of attempt. And then other times you have to ghost to protect yourself, I think. Like sometimes someone like really you realize, oh shit, this person's malicious, This person really doesn't have the best intentions. And again, I always try to be like, it's not that there's bad people. There's just some people that are in survival mode, and that's where they're operating from. And it sucks because they probably had again, those people that need love the most. So they probably had a really rough go at it and, really don't feel safe. And so they're really trying to get what they can from the world around them, like grabbing at things in some, like sometimes a dangerous way in order to feel a little bit of that safety. And you're just not going to be the one. So sometimes you have to recognize that. That's where the discernment comes in. You have to recognize malicious behavior. And there was a really good TikTok that was like, there's only two things that are really that make a situation like unacceptable or like ghostable or like I'm out, no questions asked. It's number one is malicious intent, and number two is callous disregard. Because callous disregard has the same net effect as malicious intent, right? It's like it can be just as dangerous, someone that just really disregards you. But malicious intent first and foremost. So I think like I've been in a situation where I recognize that someone was being malicious and like deceptive in a way. And were not like who they had put in a lot of work to seem that they were. And that scared me. And not like scared me because I can handle it and I see you. But it scared me in a way where I was like, I'm definitely not going to let you know that I see you. And that's where the like not needing to explain yourself comes in, not telling people about who they are. Like it's kind of almost where like a little bit of the art of war comes in. Like not everyone is safe. Not everyone deserves your explanations. And again, it's not because they're bad people. It's because they're just moving from survival mode versus moving from their heart. And when you're in a place in your life where you're moving from your heart, it's really important that you work to surround yourself with other people that are moving from their heart too. So, I think in the malicious intent situation, it's kind of like hey, I'm just letting you know that this is just not something that I can accept, or this is just not something. And I did say to that person like that is just a line that I draw. Like, this is my number one thing. And I just can't see myself moving forward with us being friends. And I mean, that's it. But so I guess that's not necessarily ghosting. It's not like I'm never going to like answer them. I let them know.
Yeah. That's not ghosting, but there's space for ghosting.
Yeah. Yeah. And if someone's like abusing you or like, again, they're like really, they're getting crazy. I mean, you just got to be done. You just got to be done. You just really have to like learn how to like say no to the drama of it all. And like not, that's where it's like, ooh, it could get easy to be caught up in the drama and to be caught up in the dynamics of like, and then they said this and wasn't that so weird and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of the times that's just because we're bored or distracting ourselves or like trying to like distract ourselves from the creative work that we really need to be doing. Like, again, I really believe people are immensely gifted and there's some things that you really got to do in this world. And so many things are distractions, men, drama, like men, but I love my husband. But you know what I mean? Like trying to get the approval of a relationship, or like, focusing on, does this person like me or this or that? Like, no. Do you like your art? Like you have things to go do and create. You have parts of yourself to meet. You have like this self-actualization process to do. Like, go do you. So sometimes we can get caught up in the drama of friendships and relationships. But once you lock in and you realize like you have this greater purpose in the world, is it worth wasting time on this drama right here and dissecting all these little things and trying to put this back together and trying to figure out if this person has good intent or not? Or are we good to just leave it here? And I think that when you are set on the goal of, I have really important things to do in this world with people that are really moving from their heart and who are showing up, you decide to give your energy to those people and to those projects and to those things. And it's just really about having that focus and direction in life as well.
It's almost like holding that self-esteem for yourself.
Yeah.
It's part of that. And that ghosting is just you acting as an esteemable act.
Dude, if you like that's why I said in the beginning, I was joking with you that I love a friendship breakup, because I don't love it. That sounds so crazy. And I haven't had that many, maybe like 3. And those are your canon events where then you start to realize, again, like such a gift. I realized, oh my God, I'm searching for my mom and people. And I'm like trying to relive that thing. And I'm like finding these like very artistic, highly talented women that don't believe in themselves. And I'm like, I'll make everything okay for you. It's okay. I'll love you. You won't love yourself. I will. Like, I'll see the best in you. And then that doesn't ever work because it's nothing but resentment, because you are trying to take on their task of loving themselves, which is not your task. It's theirs. And so you're going to resent them because you're never going to do it for them. It just doesn't happen. You can't love someone for themselves. And so you're going to be fruitless, and you're going to start to resent them, and they're going to resent you, because if they don't love themselves, someone who loves them is weird to them. They're like, ew, you love me? Like, and it's very subconscious, honestly. It's like pretty dark. But yeah, like, thank God they helped me to grow in my personal journey of understanding my mother wound and understanding that I was, again, like recreating these friendships with like highly intelligent, highly creative, wonderful women. Again, love them. But that like, I was doing it in a way of like reliving my trauma with my mom, who was this highly intelligent, highly talented artist who from a very young age would tell me how depressed she was and how much she hated life. And I was like, oh my God, I have to make my mom happy. I have to, like, she would always say how much she hated herself and didn't believe in her work and all these things. And I was like, she has to see how amazing she is. I'm looking at this woman like she's the best thing on earth. Still do. So, that was something that's a lot for a young child. And so of course you're going to try to recreate that. Of course you're going to try to close that loop. And relationships built on that, again, it ain't right relationship, because it's meeting your need. It's meeting your need of closing your loop of childhood trauma and your mother wound. It's not actually built on seeing the person in front of you and what they may need or who they really are. It's like using them as your surrogate mother. So even that is like still trying to meet your unmet needs through another person without actually witnessing and seeing that person unrelated to you. So I'm not the victim. You know what I mean? Like, neither of us are. They had their own reasons for joining that dynamic. They were very, I'm sure, benefited by me doing whatever I could to like make things okay for them, you know? And that was probably their wounding. And it was destined to end in flames. So I'm grateful for those like more catastrophic ones, because otherwise I wouldn't have seen like, oh my God, of course I have this dynamic and I can now work on that. And I can now work on being my own internal mother and showing that love to myself and to my inner child, and like modeling the healthy mother that my inner child didn't get to see, so that I can close that loop within me. Because if I can now realize, oh, I am the mother, I am the inner mother, my higher self is here, and I'm the adult now. I get to drive the ship, and I can see my own intelligence. I can see my own creativity. I can see my own power. I can make myself happy. My inner child can see that, and I can close that loop within myself. And that's really who I need to turn the attention towards. It was also like me running away from myself, running away from doing my own work because I could fixate on doing theirs. So there's so many layers to it, but that's what I mean by you only learn about yourself in relationship. How could I have learned those things and gotten those insights about my own behavior and proclivities and like my own, neuroses and the ways in which I'm looking to meet these needs in relationships, and how could I get that assignment of, oh, here's what I need to do within me to move forward without learning those divine lessons from those relationships. Like the relationships are so valuable in that sense. They really, even the bad ones, they teach us everything if we're willing to see. And I think a lot of people look towards psychedelics and like mushrooms and this and that, which a lot of people look towards those things to give them these profound insights and give them the answers and show them who they really are and show them their trauma and what they need to do and all the things. That could happen. It's also really hard to be shown all of those things in 6 hours and then integrate them and remember them and make changes in your life. It's actually, in a sense, easier to just pay a lot of attention to your dysfunctional relationships and all of the material you already got in front of you through your life events, because life's going to hit you. So really like pay attention, be curious about, dissect, ask questions, cultivate an awareness around the relationships that have been trying to teach you the same things. And through self-reflection, through like really taking this eye of, again, ownership, what's mine, what's not mine, why did I put up with that? Why did I act like that? Why did I hurt them? Why was I okay when they were hurting me? What part of me needed that? What part of my inner child liked that? Like all of these questions that take time, but can be answered through the picture that your life is already trying to paint to you. Like your pain is a psychedelic. Your failed relationships and good relationships and everything in between are a psychedelic. It's all messages for you. It's all like a divine string of meaning that's like waiting for you to put it all together. Every time I've been able to say no to a karmic dynamic that was put in my life so that I could say no to it, right? So that I could garner up enough pain or being tired of being treated a certain way or being tired of whatever to finally say no and like choose myself. Every single time that has happened, the trust that I've built within myself has been immeasurable and cannot be compared to any other trust building exercise. Because leaving relationships behind is so hard, because friendship breakups and grieving people and just even like challenging the status quo and changing things up, even just like bringing something up in a relationship or a friendship is like so scary. Like hard conversations are so scary because all of that is so difficult. Those acts of doing any of those things, including saying no and leaving a dynamic that's not serving me, have been such great exercises for my self-esteem, or have been such great like proof points for my self-esteem, because I've said self-esteem is only built through esteemable acts. That is the only way to build your self-esteem, to go from a place of not liking yourself, not having any self-worth, feeling like you're just worthless, uncomfortable in your own skin, feeling like you can't trust yourself, can't trust your intuition. You have to just start by doing little things and following through on them. You just have to start by like making your bed every day or doing your skincare routine every day, even when you don't want to do it, or like feeding yourself well. And all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, I'm kind of treating myself like a person that has worth. And it feels like you're faking it in the beginning when you start, for sure. But those repeated acts are a lot better information to your brain than affirmations. Like, I love myself. I like those just don't work. When you don't have self-esteem, looking in the mirror and being like, I can do anything. I love myself, blah, blah, blah. It feels worse because it feels so out of alignment with how you actually feel inside. And you're just like lying to yourself. It's like, no, prove it. So you can prove it in all the little ways, and you should prove it in all the little ways, taking care of yourself, committing to yourself, taking a walk every day, especially when you don't want to, even if it's a 10-minute walk. Like all these little things can start to build your self-esteem because they're esteemable acts. But the big things, when your back's really up against the wall and you see the way in which you'll actually provide for yourself, even when it's really painful and involves losing a person, but you're choosing you, those are the moments when your self-esteem just like really solidifies and skyrockets. And I've just been so proud of myself for being able to say no and leave those dynamics, and for being able to recognize that something wasn't good for me and make a right decision. Because so many times we recognize things aren't good for us and we don't make the decision to leave it behind. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be the 10 years that I smoked weed and was like, this is fine. It's like, somewhere that things aren't good for you, and like you continue to self-betray. And there's such a delicate balance in life between not betraying yourself and also doing what's best for everyone else around you. And it'll always be a dance, but I think you have to start before you can be of service and do what's best for everyone around you. You have to start by really getting the not self-betraying part right.
Do you think that there are pros to the loneliness that comes when you need to separate yourself from somebody and perform an esteemable act, and you are left with loneliness?
It is medicine. It's pure medicine. Loneliness is a hell of a drug. And just like the nature of life is duality and two opposing truths that could not be further from one another, are somehow exactly just as true at the same time at all times. We do need people. We will always have people around us. We will always have to rely on people, have to interact with people. Relationships are essential. We're social creatures, right? That's one side of the duality. The other side of the duality is we are completely alone, and we came in this world alone, and we're going to leave this world alone. And so those 2 points, you kind of need to learn how to live in and exercise and internalize and be okay with both of those. And you can't really be okay with the side that's like, I need people. You can't really, that's the funny part. You can't need people in a healthy way if you can't also be completely alone and be fine. So if you can't be alone, if you cannot like hold yourself down and totally be okay with, if no one ever loves me again, I'm good because I got myself and I'm my own friend and I like my own company, right? If you don't have that solidified, you will feel a lack within you. You will feel lonely when you are with yourself. You will feel something is missing. You will have a need that is unmet and cannot be met if it has to be. And thus you will search outside of yourself in a pathological way where you're viewing everything outside of you as a way to meet that need. And you're not seeing everything else outside of you for what it really is, and can't then appreciate the things outside of you. And so you will need people in a way that is unreasonable. You will need people in a way that is pathological. You will need people in a way that you're relying on them to do the things that you cannot do for yourself, but yet should not expect another to do. You're going to need people to meet your own needs that you should be able to meet. You're going to need people to love yourself in the ways that you can't love you. You're going to need people to soothe you because you can't self-soothe. You're going to start to need people and call on people to do things that are just unreasonable to expect of them. And that will then create resentment, and that will then create conflict in your interpersonal relationships. And yet, we do need people, just not in that way where we need them to do the work that is ours. We need them to do the tasks that are inherently ours. We need people in a healthy way. We need people because life's not really worth it alone, right? Like yes, we can absolutely be alone, and we should be able to be alone and enjoy our solitude in our own company. But what's the point if we don't have people around to share things with and enjoy things with? What's the point? What's one person, what I lack in, another person excels in, and we need each other in that way. We need to share skills. We need to teach each other. There's so many ways in which we are interdependent with one another and evolve to be that way. But you can truly be interdependent instead of codependent when you are good on your own, and the experience of loneliness just becomes aloneness. You can be alone and really not be lonely. And that's the hardest thing to cultivate. And that's the number one thing that we all have to cultivate. And that's been the most helpful thing along my entire journey. And I think every problem I've ever had in a relationship can probably be traced back to my original discomfort in being alone and being lonely. And once I started to work on that, all of my relationships got better, and I could suddenly see the ways in which I was pathologically relying on another person to meet some kind of a need that all of a sudden I became aware of and was like, oh crap, I got to meet that for myself so that I stop relying on this person. So in that sense, yeah, the loneliness is an exercise. And sometimes, like Karine says, it has to be dramatic. Sometimes you wouldn't actually be forced to face that aloneness and be comfortable with that aloneness if you were able to stay in that relationship. And so sometimes something catastrophic, earth-shattering, heartbreaking has to come along and happen. So that relationship has to end. And then you are forced to be with yourself. You are forced to be alone. And that's when that loneliness becomes medicinal. It's really hard at first, but it's going to sharpen you. It's really painful at first, but it's going to make you resilient. When your back's up against the wall, you will prevail. Like you will find a way to show up for yourself. And so it just kind of, it's like nature's way of forcing evolution. It's just forcing your soul's evolution. It's just forcing you to grow through relationship. That's why it's such a gift. We just don't grow otherwise. And when you look at these things as almost like a challenge or as an exercise in which to remember that we are truly alone at the end of the day, and you're the only person who has you. And when you look at them as things that sharpen you and ways in which you've chosen yourself and ways in which you've learned lessons, and you see all of the positives that come from the pain, and you take the personal responsibility, and you also see the ways in which certain things just weren't your responsibility and weren't your job to accept, you're able to just be so much more stoic about it and so much more like strong and like, yeah, I needed that. Yeah, like life hurt me again, because life's going to only hurt you again, and it's going to bless you, and it's going to hurt you again, and it's going to be a never ending cycle of that until we die. So we might as well get used to sitting in the pain and like be as ruthlessly analytical and positive and juice all we can from it. Because in certain ways, it's a gift. It's an opportunity to see ourselves more clearly. It's an opportunity to see other people more clearly. It's an opportunity to avoid that same mistake again. It's an opportunity to become wiser. And it's quite empowering to be able to arm oneself with a sense of preparation for life's inevitable pain, and be able to remember that we faced it with grace in the past and we'll face it with grace again. And it'll only ultimately make us stronger than to constantly be walking through life terrified, waiting for the other shoe to drop, because we know it will. And I used to live like that. I used to live where I was really happy for a period of time, as we are as humans. And I'm like, oh, this is going to last forever. Please last forever. Like, please, God, don't make anything ever go wrong again. This is the permanent state, right? Like, it's just, things are always going to be like this, right? Now that they're good. And I couldn't even enjoy those times of happiness because I was waiting for the bad thing to come after. And I'm like, oh, this always happens to me. When things are going good, something goes bad. What do you think, you're special? That's life. That happens to everybody. You're not in some like special kind of suffering, or it only happens to you, or you're a victim because life's so unfair. And as soon as you're happy, something goes wrong. That's duality. That's the thing that we all maybe somehow signed up for. Apparently that's what they say. So you're here. You might as well accept that is the nature, and that every little bit of happiness, you better soak in that, because things won't look the same a month from now, a year from now. Things will never look the same as they are today. If you get that moment of happiness, savor it. Be so deep in that moment. Be so steeped in that and really appreciate it. And only when you really appreciate the reality, and when you really accept the reality that things are going to be real bad again, real soon maybe, can you actually appreciate the fullness and the reality of your joy and how precious this very moment is when everything's okay and all your loved ones are good at home in their bed. Like, that's the only way to meet life with any kind of vigor and zest and appreciation, is to be fully present to it all. Be fully present to the fact that it's gonna be a roller coaster, and that there's gonna be pain again. And so this moment of a little bit of happiness, of your dog being happy today, or this walk in nature where the sun is shining in like a certain way that's super cute, that's so special. That's so special because there's going to be something that makes you cry, and there's going to be so much ahead. So yeah, it's perspective. Pain gives you perspective. That's the best gift.